This video will review key selective incorporation cases, focusing on the reasoning and majority opinions behind landmark rulings. In Gitlow v. New York, 1925, the Supreme Court ruled that freedom of speech is a fundamental liberty protected by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. This was the first time the Bill of Rights was applied to state governments. However, the court upheld Gitlow's conviction using the bad tendency test. Neer v. Minnesota, 1931, addressed the freedom of the press. The majority opinion established that prior restraint, government censorship before publication, is generally unconstitutional, highlighting the First Amendment's purpose to prevent government censorship. Hamilton v. Regents of the University of California, 1934, concerned the free exercise of religion. Majority opinion, Justice Pierce Butler, wrote that while the 14th Amendment does protect religious liberty against state action, a state university's requirement for military training did not violate that right. The court held that students weren't forced to attend the university, and the state had a valid interest in training its citizens for defense. The nuance: while the students lost this case, the court officially recognized that religious liberty was part of the liberty protected by the 14th Amendment. Cantwell v. Connecticut, 1940, fully incorporated the Free Exercise Clause against the states. The court ruled that while the conduct of religion can be regulated, the right to share one's belief cannot be unduly burdened by requiring a permit for solicitation. Everson v. Board of Education, 1947, incorporated the Establishment Clause, famously invoking a, quote, wall of separation between church and state. However, the court upheld the state busing subsidy as a general program aiding students, not the church directly. Mapp v. Ohio, 1961, incorporated the Fourth Amendment regarding search and seizure to the states. The ruling applied the exclusionary rule, meaning evidence obtained illegally is inadmissible in state court. Robinson v. California, 1962, was the first time the Eighth Amendment's prohibition of cruel and unusual punishment was applied to the states. The court ruled that criminalizing the mere status of being an addict, rather than an act, was unconstitutional. Gideon v. Wainwright, 1963, incorporated the Sixth Amendment right to counsel. The court ruled that the right to an attorney is fundamental for a fair trial, and counsel must be provided for those who cannot afford one. Miranda v. Arizona, 1966, focused on the Fifth Amendment's protection against self-incrimination. The court established that suspects must be read their Miranda rights, as police interrogations are inherently intimidating without these procedural safeguards. Finally, McDonald v. Chicago, 2010, incorporated the Second Amendment, establishing the right to keep and bear arms for self-defense as deeply rooted in the nation's history, thereby applying it against state and local governments.